Malcolm,
Hi.
you moved spot. That's awesome. Better
I've
reception.
moved. I've literally ran like 200 meters down the mountain. So let's see.
Okay.
Let's see.
Well, look,
Let's see if this works a little bit better.
yeah. If it cuts out again, don't worry. Let's reschedule. I don't want to put too much pressure on you. I know you're in
Okay.
high altitude. Um, but anyway, so just going back to you embarked on filming this documentary with Craig Leeson.
Yeah.
What were the challenges in getting it made? Because I know you had a rough time making this documentary. It wasn't as easy as it was meant to be. Not that it's ever easy.
Yeah. I'd have to say that, out of all of the businesses that I've set up in the last 20 years of being an entrepreneur, that fundraising a climate change movie has probably been one of the toughest things I've had to do. And after about a year of trying, we basically decided that we've got to do this ourselves, because everyone was interested in the content. They thought it was a really unique way to, explain climate change with adventure, aimed at sort of a younger audience that could understand the problem and not be scared away by all these scientific facts. But when they brought it up to the board level, they're like, we can't invest in this because we're part of the problem. And pretty much everyone is part of the problem, and it makes it quite a difficult thing to raise money for. So yeah, it was a huge problem, but the fact that we self-funded it means that we kept creative control, and now we can distribute it however we want, and we are not locked into a specific distribution partner.
So when is this movie going to come out? This documentary going to be released?
Well, as you know, COVID is posing a little bit of an issue, and one in the film industry would think that with COVID there would be a lack of content, but actually the reverse has happened. Everyone who had content has decided that they want to hold back on the release to wait for the theatrical release to be able to go forward. So there's actually a backlog of content, and that's making it a little bit difficult to work out the release. The aim for us is to have a Q1 release next year, and to do it on multi-platforms, and not just to go with one specific platform. But we're still working that process out at the moment.
So tell us about apart from the fundraising, what were the sort of main filming challenges? Because you're an adventure, extreme sports adventurer. You actually took Craig Leeson up some big mountains, and he's never really been up these kinds of altitudes before. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting experience. Craig Leeson is an oceans guy. He's scared of heights, and he really wanted to see this firsthand himself. And we also wanted to do it as carbon light as possible. So it was unavoidable having to fly film crews to a location, but we didn't want to use helicopters. We were filming in certain national parks where you couldn't film with drones. And as a paragliding pilot, it was the natural thing to suggest that we use paragliders. A little crazy idea to fly from 6,000 meters with him strapped to the front of me with professional cameras to try to get really interesting perspectives of the glacier, and to also engage the audience in trying to do that with a guy who is fundamentally scared of the mountains.
And basically, that's what you did. You strapped him in front of you and got him to film the journey down.
Yeah. So there were some hairy moments there for sure.
And tell us a little bit about the risks of speed riding, which I believe is the terminology for this kind of sport. It's not paragliding, right? Speed riding.
Well, I do speed riding and speed flying, which is when you use skis and you fly, 90 to 100 kilometers an hour and use tiny little wings that are 13 meters and less. But we use big paragliders, tandem paragliders, to do the filming. We do use some speed wings to film some of the shots in the Alps. But yeah, we had to use several different disciplines: mountaineering, multi-pitch climbing, alpinism, speed flying, paragliding. So it was a mixed bag of things that Craig basically had to learn from scratch.
Incredible. And is it dangerous? Is there a high death rate for this sport?
Para-alpinism, which is the combination of all those sports to get yourself to high mountains and to fly off, you know, there's really only 50 active people doing it around the world. So I mean, I wouldn't say it's dangerous if you do not assess the situation correctly and you don't back down at the right time. It can be fatal. And the issue with para-alpinism is that you have to be good at all 5 disciplines and have a good knowledge of all 5 of those things to keep yourself safe. So in that respect, yes, it's very dangerous, but it can be practiced extremely safely with the correct knowledge and time and effort, which is the part of the sport that I enjoy. It's the problem solving. It's very much like doing business, whereas people look at it just like you're a crazy nutter. It actually takes a lot of planning, a lot of a lot of education and a lot of learning to do safely.
Since we got cut off earlier, maybe you could just kind of reiterate what you discovered on your journey of making this documentary. What were the key takeaways from making it?
Yeah, so I mean, the key takeaways for me was the fact that glaciers aren't just pretty bits of ice on the top of mountains. I mean, it is the life support system for 1/3 of the world's planet, and they are essentially locked up water reserves. I was talking about Peru. Peru, 90% of the population is dependent on the glaciers in the Peruvian Andes. And the worst case models that we were looking at, or just the models that they're trying to be accurate on, are saying that within 40 years we're going to lose those glaciers, and that means 90% of the population is going to be without water. Peru is actually one of the driest places on Earth, and I didn't know that till I went to Peru. And I mean, to think that many million people are going to be without home, food, agriculture, and water within 40 years is something we're going to have to deal with. And the title of this talk is, is it past the tipping point? Are we beyond the point of rescue? Well, the damage, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we were talking about tipping points. Well, we're past the tipping points. The damage is being done and it's irreversible, and we will have to deal with it. That's my biggest takeaway from this. And we can slow it down and we can stop it, but those cogs are in motion and we will deal with it. We will see mass migration. We will see people go without water. We will see people homeless. And this is going to happen because of a result of inaction over the last 10 years. And that means that the next 10 years is even more important to slow or stop this type of damage happening from around the world.
Yeah, a recent UN report came out that we essentially have to cut our production of fossil fuels by 6% every year until 2030 to reach to keep the heating within 1.5 degrees centigrade that was agreed in the Paris Treaty. But in fact, with COVID and all the government funding, we're actually increasing the fossil fuel production, they reckon, by 2%. So, I mean, you have children, and there's that quote that, we don't inherit the planet from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children's future. I mean, are you concerned for your children and their generation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% concerned. I mean, everyone who has kids should be concerned about climate change. Anyone without kids should be concerned about climate change. It's not something that is for, going to be a consequence in their generation. It's a consequence that we're going to have to now deal with in our generation. But I'm optimistic. I think 4 years ago when I started this, there's a statistic that 50% of North Americans thought climate change was a hoax or a political agenda. Now, 90% of people believe it's true. But there's a wave of change, and we're at that tipping point of people believing, seeing the consequences happening, and going, what can I do today? And that's kind of what we try to address in the third part of our film is, okay, right, we've unanimously shown you a very simple example of why this is important, and it's one of the biggest fallouts of climate change that we're all going to have to deal with. And we're not going to get these glaciers back. They're going. We can stop them from melting if we can keep to the Paris Agreement in certain areas of the world, but we're going to have to deal with it. And that's the reality. But people are willing to make the change now, and they need the information, and that's what we try to do in the third part of the film, is give you that information to be able to make the change.
Now, of course, we kind of think of ice melting and glacial change happening glacially, like over centuries. But have you seen in your time up in the mountains changes in the ice?
Just there's a glacier right there, which is one of my favorite glaciers, which is the Boson Glacier, which comes off Mont Blanc, and I've speed flown down there 3 times now, and I mean, this is one of my homes in the world. And I love the mountains, and you can see it every year. It gets shorter and shorter. That particular glacier behind me is a steep glacier, so its retreat is less apparent to the eye, whereas a lot of the glaciers like the Mer de Glace or the Fiche Glacier in Switzerland, they're very horizontal. And so there's a tipping point where one year it gets too warm, and that layer of the atmosphere gets too warm, and the whole glacier just sort of gets devastated in one go. And that's the problem in the Alps, is there's a lot of those big glaciers like that are just disappearing rapidly. And you mentioned the Himalayas. They have a huge problem. There's going to be water shortages in the Himalayas. They're losing a third of their glaciers already up to now, and they're going to lose another third over the next 20-30 years. And that's some of the poorest parts of the world having to deal with what the richest part of the world is doing to the atmosphere and the climate.
Yeah, it's very, very scary. I mean, I have a question here from Sean Fitzpatrick. Are there any technologies that humans can employ in order to remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere that are effective? Carbon capture.
Carbon capture is actually quite an interesting business to be in now, and it's really in the last 12 months that you're seeing people be innovative in this space. I saw a new diamond company which was collecting carbon from the atmosphere and creating diamonds for sale. There are machines being generated in Switzerland that farm out the carbon monoxide and dioxide from the atmosphere with big fan ventilators, and pumps those through aquaponic and polytunnel farms to help the vegetables grow even quicker. So I mean, unfortunately, I don't think that's the answer. I think we really have to address the output. We do also have to address the issue of sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. The best way to do that is to plant trees. So, if we could plant 4 billion trees and slow down the carbon emissions and change over to sustainable energy sources, that's what we need to be doing over the next 10 years. And I think with enough pressure, we're going to get there. But that everyone cannot be relaxed about this issue. We all need to apply as much pressure as possible.
I think you mentioned earlier, like, we're all part of the problem, because even though we can do a few things to be more sustainable, we all still travel, we all still emit carbon. And are we doing enough individually, or should we put more pressure on corporations, on governments to do more? Whose responsibility is this? There's 3 angles here. Yeah, the individual. What can you do at home? What can a student do? What can a 12-year-old do? What can a 25-year-old university student do? Change your diet. Travel, less. Use a bicycle. Don't fly as much. If you do fly, offset your carbon. Invest back into your carbon footprint to reduce it. So that's the individual. Everyone who has the knowledge, who is educated, who has seen movies like ours or Inconvenient Sequel or Before the Flood or any of these things, please act. That's the first thing. The next 2 things are corporations. Anyone who runs a corporation should try to get the corporation to change. I know it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult for us as business owners to swap over, and it costs money and it hits your P&L. But try your best at least. And then there's the policymakers, and they need the most pressure because they can incite the biggest change. And we're seeing that, in Europe, that's a lot of countries by 2030 are going to ban, carbon emitting cars, and it's all happening now, but it has to happen quicker. Now, one of the reasons it's really fascinating to hear your stories, because you're first and foremost an entrepreneur, right? And we just talked about how capitalism needs to become more conscious and more sustainable, it does make it harder to do business if you're being more sustainable. Can you be profitable and be sustainable? For example, in your business, you're in the food restaurant business. I mean, is that actually an achievable target? And what things are you doing to your business?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting question. Again, at the beginning of this 4-year process, I would have said it's actually incredibly difficult to eliminate plastic out of your business. There's not enough alternative products. You know, just taking cling film, for example, it's 40 times more expensive to use, you know, sustainable cling film 2 years ago than to just use the normal stuff. And so businesses that are struggling to survive don't have the liberty of making those decisions. That's changed now. There's been innovation in products, in plastics, in plastic alternatives, and the price points are coming down, and it doesn't hurt your P&L that much. And actually, the consumer is educated now that they will pay slightly higher prices to feel good about the products they're consuming. And so I think, yeah, maybe 2 years ago it was a bit, you had more of a valid excuse for not trying, but I think now you know, there's enough innovation out there, and if there isn't, then try to be the business that makes that innovation, you know, because there's people that want to do the change.
Absolutely. What were the most dangerous moments in the filming of Last Glaciers? And would you recommend to anyone out there to go and make a documentary about the environment, or do you recommend people to just stay at home?
It's an interesting question, Sean. Someone asked me what if I wanted to make a difference, and I was an individual with a low budget, what should I do? And there's so many different forms of media now that it's incredibly easy to put your story online. You know, we're on, I mean, this is my first Instagram live. And,
on top of a mountain.
On top of a mountain, I've accidentally switched off twice, and I'm learning how to get my head around the IT problem. But I mean, there's so many different media sources. There's, you know, like anyone can create a story with a phone right now, and just if you find something or you've got a story to tell, just put it out there. Don't be scared. In terms of what was the most dangerous thing that we did, it was flying Craig off via Oahu in the Cordillera Blanca range in Peru at 6,000 meters, and I was not a very experienced tandem paragliding pilot. I'd done a lot of speed flying, a lot of solo wing flying, and the guy that was actually supposed to fly Craig off the mountain ripped his calf muscle open and had 40 stitches, and came to base camp and got me on the radio. And I just remember turning to Craig and just saying to him, look, buddy, you run now like your life depends on it, and if you trip up, we're gonna die. And please, like, stay focused. And he was tired, and you know, we'd all lost like 5 to 6 pounds of weight and exhausted, standing up at altitude. And yeah, we got off. And we were so elated when we landed, we ended up hugging for about 5 minutes on the ground without moving. So I mean, that was the most dangerous.
Amazing. Was it filmed? Was the hugging filmed?
The hugging is filmed. It is in the movie. If you'd like to see me and Craig hugging each other, that content is available to the public.
There we go. Looking forward to that bit. So you've talked about, you've highlighted the issues of plastic and plastic ocean. You've tackled the issue of climate change in the Last Glaciers. What's next? I mean, how much bigger a topic can you get?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of media, I think I want to turn my attention to not just highlighting problems now, but I think the answer is to provide shorter, easier, quicker media content over the next 12 to 24 months to support these films and businesses, to show them that the innovation is there and that changes can be made. And whether that's, you know, helping through, you know, one of our companies that we set up off the back of Plastic Oceans was called Plastic Conscious, to provide plastic alternatives to the restaurant industry in Asia. And we've solved that cling film problem, for example, and that's one of our products, and it's been rolled out in the Mandarin Oriental group and a couple of other 5-star hotels, and things like that. So,
great.
there's a point when you've got to turn towards helping solve the problem, and I think the films are sort of big wake up messages, and there's some work to be done now.
You've had a pretty illustrious career spanning different industries. What would you say is your proudest moment or proudest achievement so far?
I mean, besides my kids, which I'm immensely proud of, and any father should definitely say that. I'd say the work that I'm doing with the United Nations has been quite humbling. During the process of the film, they made me their mountain hero for climate change, and I'm doing a lot of work with them in the upcoming year. You know, just talking about glaciers and mountains, and keeping the environment pristine, and highlighting some of the issues and solutions around climate change in this sort of environment. So I would say that work to me is the stuff that I'm the most proud of everything I've done in the recent years.
Just one question from Hopa Loop Hong Kong. What can individuals do on a daily basis to help? Top 3 things. You mentioned a few tips before, but just re-list top 3 tips.
Yeah, so travel is one of them. You know, everyone's got to get on a plane. Most airlines have offsetting programs now. So if you go into Cathay Pacific, you can actually offset your ticket online directly. You can do it with Emirates. So just invest a little bit more money. It's actually not that expensive to offset your, plant a couple of trees or be in part of a green project. There's a lot of debate over which foods have bigger carbon footprints. You know, they all have packaging, they're all being imported, they're all being flown around. An avocado out of season is from Mexico. Beef is terrible. I mean, go green, you know, and if you want to eat meat, eat it once a week. But, you know, there's no excuse with the knowledge not to make those changes today. And diet is definitely one of those things that will help. People don't like being told what to eat. But it's not about eliminating things, it's about reducing things. If you can't eliminate it, if you don't have the willpower to do it, reduce it, and then at least you're making a difference. And then localization is a big one. Localize your travel, walk to work, buy things that are locally sourced and not imported, all of that sort of stuff. So that would be my top 3 things. You can see paragliders just flying off behind me.
Okay, well look, I mean, I think we got the bulk of the interview. Why don't we get the bonus footage? Why don't you show us your rigging? Do you think you can do that?
Yeah, no, I can do that. I've had to walk down a little bit, so I'm gonna have to walk back up again.
Sure.
So there's a few things we're attempting to do. I mean, tandem speed flying is a relatively new sport, and there's only a few companies that make the glider, and I actually supported a buddy of mine who invented the sport as one of his investors to get this product off the ground. And we're trying to be the first people to speed fly tandem off a couple of peaks that it's never been done before.
Wow.
Talking and walking uphill at altitude, it's getting me out of breath.
Don't worry about it. But what's the impetus for doing it? I mean, is it just the thrill? Is it the high? Is it the perspective? Or is it the feeling of flying like an eagle?
It's the challenge. I mean, you're problem solving. You got to get up the mountain using mountaineering and all these sort of things. So you can see this is the wing.
Wow.
So a couple of the key sponsors, and 2 sets of skis here, and then we're going to strap ourselves in to that, fly down there.
How long does it take to get down?
About 2 minutes.
Amazing.
1,000 meters in 2 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Malcolm. We won't hold you up any longer. Maybe just a final message to the people out there. What can they do to make a difference?
Well, as I said, I think, you know, anyone with a computer, Google, it's easy to find out what you can do. There's easy changes you can make today. Don't think the problem is beyond you or too big to deal with at the home level or the personal level. every little bit helps, because every little bit slows down the destruction and the pace at which things are happening. And I think that's kind of the biggest message. I think we can all make a difference. And yeah, fantastic. I think we're gonna solve this for sure. I'm optimistic.
Thanks, Malcolm. That's really inspiring. Thank you. Maybe you can film a bit of footage and send it to us. We'll put it in the interview later.
Yeah, we will do.
Safe flight, and thanks again. Looking forward to seeing the movie next year, Q1, Q2 perhaps.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me on the show. Cheers. Bye.